Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Book Wormies. I'm your host, Aaron Helton, here to take you down the wonderful world of nonfiction books. Today marks a special occasion as this will actually mark the end of my run with Book Wormies. I will give a heartfelt goodbye and some reflections at the very end of this episode, but before that, I have a very exciting final book for you. As I mentioned in my last episode, talking about Atlas of the Heart with Brené Brown, I talked about that book and this one being kind of culminations or kind of final next step books in which I was able to see a lot of the emotional intelligence and psychology practice that I had learned in my growth as a coach and also just in life, and the humanity of that book and then this one that I'll introduce you to. And those are kind of culminations of things that I had learned, and they helped me to kind of level up. So this book is Creatures of a Day by Irvin Yalom. Creatures of a Day by Irvin Yalom. Now, I mentioned this book a little bit when we talked about Tell Me What You Want, about 8 of my episodes back. And that book, or this book similar to that book, Tell Me What You Want and Creatures of a Day, both talk about the relationship of the psychotherapist, psychiatrist, psychology practitioner, and the client or the patient in some cases. So I, of course, resonated very highly with this book as a coach and thinking about my clients. However, with this book, the thing that I really enjoyed is, I believe I mentioned this before when talking about Tell Me What You Want, and I don't want to compare these books. They are both strong in their own way, and I know that I mentioned that specifically in that episode of talking about Tell Me What You Want. The difference that I enjoy in Creatures of a Day specifically is where Tell Me What You Want had a unique perspective and, of course, each relationship-focused book, when it's between a therapist or a psychology practitioner and their client, it always comes at the perspective of the author, which is generally the psychology practitioner that is taking the role of, they're the author and telling their stories with their clients. And what really strikes me as a huge difference is that in Tell Me What You Want, the focus was on the theme problem, or the theme, focus, the idea of power or loyalty or curiosity, whatever theme was in the need in Tell Me What You Want, because the focus was on 12 different needs, I believe. And it talked about how they understood that that was the need that was coming up. In Creatures of a Day, the theme that comes out to me is perhaps maybe the ambivalence, I want to say. Irvin Yalom, when he writes, is not afraid to put in messages of, I did not mean to say that in this situation with this client, but here's how it went. And it's very, to me, human, I think. And that's really the strength, I think, in this type of storytelling, I want to say. The idea of, hey, I messed up and here's how it went and it ended well. Like the direction that I took this, all roads lead to truth. That's something that we talk about a lot in my field, is all roads lead to truth. And I think that Irvin Yalom really shows this very prevalently, both in Creatures of a Day and in another work that I've read of his, Love's Executioner. And as we talk about the ambivalence and the humanity of these relationships in this book, because it's 10 different cases, I believe, or 10 total cases, because it's only about 10 chapters, about 200 pages, roughly. About 200 pages. And the amazing thing about this book is it pulls you in, I think. And that may be my natural bias and my natural curiosity as a psychology practitioner. However, to me, the nature of you get to watch this interaction, see how this goes, hear Irvin Yalom's inner workings and inner thoughts of, should I have gone that way? Like, I wanted to go this way, but I took the choice and I took a risk and I went this direction instead. Or I put a pin in this idea, even though that could have equally been something that could have helped this client or this patient, depending on what they needed. And so as I read through this, another thing that I really enjoy at the very end of these chapters is it kind of leaves you thinking. It isn't just, here is what happened and here's how it was resolved. Sitting specifically in that ambivalence, it allows the reflection of me as the reader to enter into the book, because it's kind of like a cliffhanger in a movie where you say, well, this is what happened. Well, we don't know for sure, but you get some understanding into yourself as you say, well, due to the information I have, here is how I think that went, if that makes sense. So as I read Creatures of a Day and I think, man, that was an interesting situation. I wonder how I would have tackled that, both as the client and as the psychology practitioner. How would I have handled that? And we can take concepts like this into our day-to-day interactions with other people. And we can think, how am I talking with my friends? How am I interacting in this way? Where's my intent? What mistakes am I making that turn out to be no big deal? And I think that, as mentioned, that's the strength of this book, is the ambivalence at the end of they're not giving you an answer. It's not showing you a script or a structure to behave. It's simply, here's how I explored it, and here's how it went. It's just very matter of fact, but just inconclusive enough that you're able to project your thoughts and your exploratory nature and your curiosity into these situations. Now, there are resolutions, of course. There are resolutions in many of these cases, and I think that that's powerful in and of itself as well, because it'd be a pretty poor story if there was only a bunch of pieces and questions and no resolution, right? But I really appreciate the "it is what it is" sort of concept. And I don't like that phrase, "it is what it is," but in this case, I think it works incredibly well because it's just so human. And finally, as mentioned, this book, it came to me at a time when I needed it. It showed up, my boss, my coworkers, and I, of course, read this book when I was just starting out in coaching, probably my first year. And I loaned it to a friend of mine, and it actually just came back to me just in time to make this episode, to record this story about it as the culminating kind of final piece of my run with the Book Wormies podcast. And so from that, I want to speak to the concept of, I guess, a theme that's both with the book and with life, which is all roads lead to truth. It will work out no matter what happens. The idea that this book has so much ambivalence and humanity to it, and then for it to come back into my life at a point where I now have grown more to the point where I can say, I can appreciate this in a new light. And I probably never would have picked it up again. I might have skimmed it a couple times, but I probably wouldn't have tackled it in depth unless I was making a podcast episode specifically for it. And so to me, it's just a beautiful sort of fate, I suppose, in which everything is lined up to where I'm reading this book again thoroughly to reconnect with the lessons that came from it. So as mentioned, I hope that you all have enjoyed the books that I've recommended. I hope overall that some of the books have been exciting. My time with the Book Wormies podcast has been wonderful. And I've learned a lot about how I want to talk about these books. I know sometimes my style could come as more of a report because I didn't want to take away too much of your experience of reading a book by sharing pieces and talking exclusively of my perspective and twisting yours. I hope that I danced on that balance just well enough to intrigue you and hopefully give you food for thought, potentially, as I talked a little bit about some of the things that I pulled from these books. Finally, I hope that these books help you grow as a person, as they have for me. Not just in the last year, but continuously as I revisit many of the books that I have. I put tabs in them. I underline them. I unfortunately put a lot of damage in my books, put a lot of wear and tear, but it's a form of love for the books that I have to continuously revere them through use rather than through keeping them pristine, personally. And as I reflect on the last year of growth, just as this podcast has gone and also as my book choices have gone, I am very thankful for the time that I've spent with everybody talking about these books and really, really diving into them. Not just passively reading, but intentionally searching for what is affecting me in this book. What story is this bringing out of me? How am I growing? And I've carried that across even fantasy novels or other types of books that I've read that I haven't spoken about here. And so I'm very thankful for the journey that I've had. And I hope that I've helped even one person to pick up one of these books that have changed me and hopefully helped you to grow as well. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by the Book Wormies podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Helton. And again, thank you so much.